Okay, this video is about Charles Perelle, the president of ACF-Brill from 1949 to 1954. He was a engineering student in college, got out in the early 30s, and there were very few jobs. He wound up as a painter's helper at Boeing Aircraft Corporation at 40 cents an hour. He paid attention to what he was doing. And he had a gift for being able to spot efficiencies in production. And he stayed with it until 1940. He had raised himself up to division manager at Boeing Aircraft Canada, and also production manager at the Boeing in Seattle after that. In 1940, he went to Vultee Aircraft as a general manager, vice president in charge of production. Then he moved to Consolidated Aircraft Corporation in Los Angeles. And he went to work. They were building PBYs. They were building Coronado flying boats, consolidated Liberators, B-24s. Then Vultee Corporation merged with Consolidated. Reuben Fleet, the head of Consolidated, was angry about the government controlling things, and he had tax problems, so he sold it. And in the merger, then some people got let go in it all, and ended up. Mr. Perelle decided to get out, so he resigned. And he was looking for work, and he got a call from Howard Hughes. And Howard Hughes wanted him very badly to come in and run Hughes Aircraft Corporation, offered him $50,000 a year. And Perelle said no. He knew that Howard Hughes was a very hard guy to work for. The company was messed up bad, and he didn't want to be involved in it. But Howard Hughes came back and had this time $75,000 a year, a bunch of stock options for TWA stock, a 5-year contract, and promised to stay out of the way, let him run things as he saw fit. And told him that everything was fine at the company, just needed a little management help. So Perelle took the job, went to work, and found out that things were really bad there, worse than anybody could imagine. They had a contract for a bunch of camera planes, photo planes, and also military, the giant Spruce Goose flying boat, and it was all behind schedule. And the people there who worked there just didn't know how to do things right. So Perelle dived in, set things straight, organization-wise, cut out duplications. But there were problems at Hughes also Aircraft. He was the vice president of the Hughes Tool Company, and then also manager of the aircraft factory. And the people would have meetings and not invite him in for big decisions, and that made him mad. He was making progress getting airplanes built, but eventually the government canceled the contract for the photo planes because the war was over. And Howard Hughes also was taking men off the aircraft factory's workload and moving them to his movie production. And that made Mr. Perelle very mad, and he wrote him a letter and says, this is not going to happen anymore. And Howard Hughes fired him. And they had a 5-year contract, and it took years for them to settle it out. But I believe Mr. Perelle wound up with the stock options for $250,000, and the contract was settled all in court because he had all in writing. So from there, he moved to the Garwood Corporation, which made dump bodies, hoists, boats, stoves, furnaces, and pulleys, hoist mechanisms for bulldozers. And he went in, and the company was having a lot of trouble. The boat business didn't make money, so that had to get eliminated. There was a boat at works at Newport Beach, Virginia, and one also on the one of the Great Lakes. And they both had to be liquidated because there was no way to fix them so they would make money. The other parts of the company could make money, so he adjusted things there. He got rid of the stove company. He got rid of the furnace company. The company needed capitalization. He made a deal with a man who was a big wheel in a automobile manufacturer. And he made a deal with him. The company, or Mr. Perelle, I'm not sure whose money it was, put up $150,000. And this investor would put in $1.5 million. But the investor got to put his 4 men on the board and gave him control of it. And also, he would install some of his friends in various positions in the company. And Mr. Perelle didn't like those guys because they didn't work hard enough. And he ended up getting rid of one of them. And that made the big investment man mad. And so eventually, too much friction was there, and Mr. Perelle left that job. And he was looking for work, and he talked to Victor Emanuel. And Victor Emanuel owned Avco Aviation Corporation, and that Avco owned Consolidated Vultee Corporation, and it also owned a Nashville Corporation, which was part of Consolidated. They made airplanes there during World War II, but they were out of product when the war was over, and so Consolidated Vultee thought they'd buy ACF-Brill from American Car and Foundry Corporation in order to have its workers who could work with aluminum very well, building something similar to an airplane, building buses. And they set up shop there, making Brill buses in Nashville, and they owned Lycoming Corporation, and that was setting up, that was up in northern Pennsylvania. And they were making engines. They wanted them to make Hall-Scott engines up there. And it all turned into a big mess. A whole bunch of buses were being produced, and there weren't enough people around companies to buy all the buses, and some of them didn't have enough money to buy the buses, so it was just oversaturated. And Mr. Perelle was called by Victor Emanuel, the head of Avco Aviation, to get down there and see if he could straighten all this ACF-Brill problem out. And the Consolidated Vultee was excited about ACF-Brill that they owned in the beginning, but after a year or two, they decided it was not working right for them. They had plenty of airplane contracts. And also, Greyhound had made a deal to buy all their buses from General Motors, so it wasn't working out for them. They sold it upstairs to Avco Aviation, Victor Emanuel's company. He installed Charles Perelle in there. The problems he found when he arrived were that Nashville inventory was huge, Lycoming inventory was huge. The costs were horrible for the company. Nashville and Lycoming the inventories, the costs were high, and Brill was heavily in debt anyway. So he went to work. Trying to tie things together, streamlining the operations for more efficiency and getting more contracts. And he ended up getting a lot of government work plus airplane parts contracts. Perelle was given a bonus by Victor Emanuel for every bus sold to get rid of the inventory. He also is said to have had an oral agreement with Victor Emanuel to take over Avco Aviation when this was settled. But later on, Brill was sold to Allen and Company of New York, and that plan evaporated. From Mr. Perelle's point of view, the last year, the company, before Mr. Perelle got there, the losses were horrible. And when Mr. Perelle came in the first year, his losses were $2.1 million. The key was to get his production organized efficiently and increase his sales. In 1952, Brill sold 7% of U.S. buses. He also came up with a financing plan for bus companies. In 1953, he was making $100,000 a year at all this. From his point of view, he said the first year was $2.1 million losses. He felt that all the place needed was an undertaker. It was a very terrible situation. He quickly found out what was wrong. Brill's did not have an assembly line. The buses were built in one spot and everybody ran over all the parts and bolted them in place. When a bus was completed, they picked it up with a crane and hopscotched over top everybody else, leapfrogged. He spent $10,000 on an assembly line, and he put in another $150 for a big winch to pull it. Where Brill once used 2,300 men on 3 shifts to build 10 buses, now he could do 700 men and turn out the same number of buses in one 8-hour shift. In 1950, Perelle cut the losses to $124,000, and rearmament brought along some $25 million in government orders for buses and in subcontracts. Perelle proudly reported that in 1951, Brill's sales rose 88% to $23.6 million, and the company turned in a profit of $2.5 million after taxes on that. And he slowly came up with the idea of financing buses because a lot of places couldn't afford to buy them. In 1954, the debt was paid down, and there was a lack of contracts. So they decided it's better to liquidate everything and put the money into something else. Now, here's a stock certificate that would have, at that time, has his signature on it. And then he moved on from there to American Bosch, Orma is the name of it at that time, and became very successful president of American Bosch. So you can see that he moved from being a worker at 50 cents an hour on the assembly line to he making $100,000 a year as the president of Brill, and he did very well at American Bosch.